Hello BookTube, welcome back to Traumatic Tomes, and today I'm going to go over my Q1 wrap-up for Historathon. If you don't know, Historathon is a year-long BookTube reading event where we read different time periods of historical nonfiction at different times of the year. It's not there aren't strict guidelines to this, but the encouragement is that you split up your history reading into 4 quarters, the first quarter being prehistory to 500 AD, the second quarter, the next 3 months being 500 AD to 1500 AD, quarter 3, then the next 3 months is 1500 to 1820 AD, and October, November, December is quarter 4 with 1820 AD to the present day. So this is a BookTube event hosted by Vin at Revenant Reads. Co-hosts are John David from Nicholas of Autrecourt, Justin from Triumphal Reads, Debs from Rainer Reads Stuff, and Bill Ruttenberg from Bill Ruttenberg. And I will link the Historathon Discord server in my YouTube description for this video. There's like 400 of us in there. I'm semi-active there. But yeah, it's a fun year-long event where we read history. And in early January, I'll link that video down below. I did my Historathon announcement video where I also set out a Q1 TBR. So January, February, March, I set out a pile of possibilities for what I could read of basically ancient history in these first 3 months of 2026. And today it's March 28th, but I don't think I'll be reading any more Q1 books this quarter. So I'm going to do my wrap-up right now. And how shall we begin? Well, I'm going to go through the TBR that I said I would read first and let you know if I completed them or if I didn't complete them. Because I'm not a machine. I didn't get to everything. But the first book I talked about in my TBR video was The Classical World by Robin Lane Fox, an epic history from Homer to Hadrian. So this is a large book. It's not technically a mammoth, but it's 672 pages, I believe. And it covers the history of the Greeks and the Romans, of course, from Homer to Hadrian. So 8th century BC to 2nd century AD. That was when Hadrian reigned as Roman emperor. And Robin Lane Fox, British classicist, he does a really good job of I know it's a big book, but it's a lot of history. He briefly covers large swaths of time. I think he does a good job. The main focus of the first half is the Greeks, of course. They were more important than the Romans from the 8th century BC to the 2nd, 3rd century BC. Well, you have Homeric Greece, then classical Greece, then Alexander the Great, and Hellenistic Greece. And after that, Rome takes priority. Then they win the Punic Wars against Carthage, and then they they conquer Greece. I forget the exact year, but it's at some point after Alexander the Great. And yeah, from there, the narrative switches to Rome. You go through the Roman Republic, the strife, civil wars, into the Roman Empire, and we go all the way to Hadrian when the Roman Empire is at its basically its extent, the largest it ever got. And this is a really great introductory history book for Greece and Rome. if you don't know anything about Greece and Rome, this might be ancient Greece and ancient Rome. This might be a good place to start. It's not too difficult. Robin Lane Fox has a nice, easy flow of writing where you won't be really confused about what happens, and you'll probably want to check out more of the stuff that he talks about at greater length in other books once you've read this. So this was my first pick, and I read it in January, had a great time, and it was the peak of my Q1 history reading, unfortunately. But I was inspired and I knocked it out early. Okay. Next up. Well, I guess this wasn't even in my TBR. I believe I read it in January as well, but that is The World of Odysseus by Moses I. Finley. I bought this at Barnes & Noble using some remnants from I had a Christmas gift card, I believe. And I had been talking about reading the Odyssey as a Historathon side quest. So a side quest in Historathon, there's a separate channel in the Discord server called side quests, but it's basically something aligned to historical nonfiction in one of the quarters, but it's not actually a history book. So the Odyssey in this case would be Q1 aligned, but it's not a history book, it's an epic poem. So that was part of my Historathon plans as a semi book. But I wanted to know a little bit more about the world of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I randomly found this. So Moses Finley, a classics professor from America who was eventually exiled due to perceived communist affiliation during the Red Scare. He moved to Britain. But he goes over, one, the archaeological records of the Trojan War and the dating of when the Trojan War happened, and he kind of knocks aside a lot of, at the time, contemporary assumptions about Troy and when it had happened, and he places the events of the Trojan War a couple centuries before the writing down of both poems by Homer. I believe in this, that would be he places the time period at the 9th or 10th century BC, so after the Mycenaean collapse, but before the time period of Homer, because Homer wasn't, the things that Homer had written about were not true to his contemporary time period, but they also did not have a good grasp of the Mycenaean period, so he's like, it has to be this in-between period. But it goes over a lot of the social, in the second part it goes over a lot of like the social, the social aspects of Greece during this time period, and why certain things in the Iliad and the Odyssey are so focused upon, like hospitality, gift giving, how the leadership structure is organized with the aristocracy and peasants and serfs and slaves and such. So I didn't think it was a very captivating book, but it was short and it was good information as a pre-Odyssey read for me. Now that I've actually, spoiler alert, now that I've actually read the Odyssey, it seems like this would be a good book to reread now that I can fully understand all the references from Finley in here. But yeah, this is my second Q1 history book, The World of Odysseus by Moses Finley. We'll go on, since I was talking about the Odyssey. I said I would read the Odyssey. in quarter one. Side quest, of course, it's not a history book, but I did read it. I did not read this translation. This is the Emily Wilson translation, but it's the book that I have to show. I read Project Gutenberg prose translation by Samuel Butler. I thought it was all right. The translation, that is. It wasn't great. It wasn't very... There wasn't much, in my opinion, literary flourish. Not that I'm thinking that the Odyssey needs that. What am I trying to say? Maybe it was a little plain, but I liked the story. It had some twists that, as someone who had never actually read the Odyssey, I wasn't expecting the story to be organized like that. But since this isn't a history book, I won't go too much into it, but I did like the Odyssey. So I said I was going to read it, and I read it in late February, early March. So there you go. Another book I said I was going to read, or I planned to read, at least, The Greek Way by Edith Hamilton. This is a partner book with her book, The Roman Way, but these... Well, I'll just talk about The Greek Way, which I did not read. I tried to read this. I read the first couple pages, and it just wasn't clicking with me. I had no idea what she was talking about, Edith Hamilton, in the first chapter. It was a lot of abstract conception of like what the spirit of Greece is, but it was almost like metaphysical, and I could barely get through like 3 pages before I had to close it and go read some like Sherlock Holmes or something. I doubt the rest of the book would have been that difficult, but I think that the gist of the Greek Way and the Roman Way is that she looks at the particular society or culture, this being Greece, and she seeks to depict how this culture is represented by the writers of its time. So in here we have, well, some general chapters, but also Pindar, Plato, Aristophanes, Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and some other stuff. But this one defeated me. I did not read The Greek Way. My apologies to everybody. I still am going to keep it, and I still would like to read this and The Roman Way at some point. All right, this next one is my biggest failure of quarter one Historathon. I did not read it, of course, and it was the biggest book on this list. It was bigger than Robin Lane Fox's The Classical World. And I had really hoped to get into this one, but I didn't, based on time and availability, I didn't get to it. And that is The Histories of Herodotus. This is the landmark edition, with all the maps and footnotes that really aid the reading experience. And The Histories of Herodotus, basically the first history book in Western literature. It covers, I believe it mostly covers the Greco-Persian War of the 5th century BC. But I've been thinking about reading Herodotus for a long time, 3 or 4 years at this point, and I only recently acquired the landmark edition, so this was the edition that I had been wanting to read. So that was my initial holdup, was not having the right edition. But in quarter one, I set it aside for February, and then I'm not justifying this. I'm just laying out what happened. I set it aside for February, and then I got wrapped up in my first two projects of 2026, The first being reading every Sherlock Holmes novel and story, which is awesome. I did that. And my second project was reading every book written by Michael Dirda, who was a former Washington Post book columnist and literary critic. And that was a 7-book project. The Sherlock Holmes was a 9-book project. So those took up a lot of my time, and I was gunning to finish them in February, and I finished both of the projects in February. But I did not have I did not make enough time to also do Herodotus in February. I don't think I read any history in February, actually. But I knew that I also wanted to read the Odyssey, so I prioritized the Odyssey because that was a bigger gap in my reading. I would consider the Odyssey a bigger gap than Herodotus, unfortunately. And then in March, I knew I was traveling for 2 to 3 weeks, and when you're traveling, you don't want to bring a book like this. I just brought mass market paperbacks when I was traveling. So, yep, it slipped under the wayside, and I did not read Herodotus. La-di-da. That's on me. I have plans for it this year, but we'll see. We'll see. More on that later. Okay. The next 3 books were all just possibilities that I kind of mentioned them offhand at the end of my TBR video. I did not read any of them. That would be From Alexander to Cleopatra by Michael Grant. Basically a longer version of that and probably better. Alexander to Actium by Peter Green. The Historical Evolution of the Hellenistic Age. This is huge. I want to get to this at some point. It looks like a great book. And also, Carthage Must Be Destroyed by Richard Miles. Basically a history of Carthage, the North African empire that fought Rome. And of course, I didn't have time for Herodotus, so I didn't read those either. So I actually only read 2 history books from quarter 1 in quarter 1, which is, for me and my goals, that was not a pathetic effort, but I know I could have done better. We'll wrap up this quarter 1 wrap up, though, with a 4th completed book. Not historical nonfiction. This is another side quest. And I just talked about this book on my channel, actually, but it's Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. This is a historical fiction book of 480 BC, the Battle of Thermopylae between the Greeks and the Persians. If you've seen the movie 300, this is a novelization of that historical event. Not of the movie, not of the comic book. It's separate. This is from 1998. But I'll link my video down below where I actually talk about my thoughts on this book, but I'll tell you I thought it was really great. Super fun, and as far as I can tell, much more based in historical fact than 300, but with just this, I think, the same level of chest thumping, emotional, powerful performances of bravery, courage, camaraderie, all of that. You got the Spartans and their thousands of other Greeks, the 300 Spartans with a ton of other Greeks, a ton of squires and slaves and everything, fighting off the Persians at the Hot Gates, Thermopylae, which is a key route for the Persian army to come down into Greece and try to conquer Greece in 480 BC. So that's the last book. So I read in totality, this was my quarter 1 for Historathon. We had the 2 side quests, the Odyssey, and Gates of Fire, which were not historical nonfiction. And then we had 2 history books, The Classical World by Robin Lane Fox and The World of Odysseus by Moses Finley. So, all in all, I know I could have done better, but I was busy with my other projects and I didn't devote as much time to Historathon. But I'm excited for quarter 2. It's coming up in April. So we get April, May, and June. And that is 500 AD to 1500 AD. So basically the Middle Ages. And that's my bread and butter. So I'm going to try to load up on a lot of English or European medieval history. So that's that. I do have plans. I'm not a huge quarter 3 and quarter 4 guy, so I might just reset in the second half of the year and do quarter 1 and quarter 2 again. But we'll see. That's for another time. I am underread in quarter 3 and quarter 4, so that could be a good opportunity to actually become better read in those time periods. But I could not as well. I'll talk to you guys later. Check the links below if you want to join the Discord server for Historathon. I'm sure it'll be buzzing at the start of quarter 2 if you want to get inspired for some medieval reads. And other than that, hope you're reading some good books. If you like history, try out some Historathon reading. But you don't have to. It's your choice.